The ship came down on a Tuesday afternoon. It made no sound as it fell through the clouds above Nevada. There were no flames, no sonic boom, nothing that anyone would expect from something entering Earth's atmosphere. It simply appeared, a massive dark shape against the blue sky, and then it was on the ground. The vessel was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Its surface was smooth and black, like polished stone, but it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were no visible windows, no doors, no markings of any kind. It sat in the desert sand like it had always been there, like it belonged. Within 2 hours, the military had set up a perimeter. Soldiers with guns they knew would be useless stood in neat lines around the alien craft. Helicopters circled overhead. Television crews from every major network had already arrived. Their cameras pointed at the ship, waiting for something to happen. Lisa Monroe arrived by helicopter just before sunset. She was a Navy commander, 43 years old, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. At least, that was what she had thought before today. She stepped out of the helicopter and walked toward the command tent that had been set up, about 100 meters from the ship. Inside, she found chaos. Generals were arguing with scientists. Politicians were shouting into phones. Everyone had an opinion about what should be done, but no one had any idea what was actually happening. "Commander Monroe," a voice called out. She turned to see Dr. Samuel Grant, a xenobiologist from MIT, whom she had met at a conference 3 years ago. He looked exhausted and terrified in equal measure. "Thank God you're here. They specifically asked for you." Lisa frowned. "They? Who is they?" Before Samuel could answer, a gasp went through the tent. Lisa turned to look at the monitors showing the live feed of the ship. A door had appeared in its surface, a perfect rectangle of light where there had been nothing before. And something was stepping through. The being was tall, nearly 8 feet, and vaguely humanoid in shape. Its skin was like polished obsidian, smooth and dark, and its eyes held a light that seemed to come from somewhere far away, like stars seen through a telescope. It wore no clothing, but there was nothing exposed that seemed inappropriate. It was simply alien, completely and utterly different from anything on Earth. Lisa grabbed a radio from the nearest soldier and walked out of the tent. Behind her, she could hear people shouting for her to stop, to wait, to think about what she was doing. She ignored them all. The being watched her approach. Its expression, if it had one, was impossible to read. When she was 10 meters away, it spoke. "You are Lisa Monroe." It was not a question. The voice was deep and resonant, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once, not just from the creature's mouth. "I am," Lisa said. Her voice was steady. "And you are?" "I am Coordinator Veth Arn of the Galactic Evaluation Council. I have come to deliver a message to your species." Lisa waited. Around her, she could feel the weight of 1,000 cameras, 1,000 microphones, 1 billion people watching through their screens. Whatever was said next would change everything. "Your species has been observed," Veth Arn continued. "For many of your generations, we have watched you grow. We have seen you discover fire and invent the wheel. We have seen you build cities and tear them down. We have seen you split the atom and walk on your moon. And now, you stand at the threshold of interstellar capability. What does that mean for us?" Lisa asked. "It means you are now subject to the standard assessment protocol. The test." The word hung in the air like a threat. Lisa felt a cold knot form in her stomach, but she kept her face calm. What kind of test? Veth Arn's starlight eyes seemed to dim slightly. "Every species that achieves your level of development must undergo evaluation. The test determines whether you are worthy to join the greater galactic community. It assesses your wisdom, your moral clarity, your capacity for civilized behavior. And if we pass, You will be welcomed as equals among the stars. You will have access to knowledge and technology beyond your current understanding. You will take your place among the civilized peoples of the galaxy. Lisa nodded slowly. And if we fail? The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. When Vethon spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost gentle. Those who fail are deemed too dangerous to exist alongside civilized beings. Their worlds are sterilized. Their histories are erased. It is the only way to preserve peace among the stars. Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. Behind her, she heard someone drop something. A woman screamed. But she forced herself to stay focused, to keep asking questions, to gather information. How many species have taken this test? 47,312. And how many have passed? Again, that terrible silence. Vethon's form seemed to flicker, like a candle flame in a breeze. None. The word hit Lisa like a physical blow. She heard the chaos erupting behind her, the shouting and the crying and the prayers. But she stood her ground, her eyes locked on the alien being before her. None, she repeated. In all the history of your evaluation, not a single species has ever passed this test. And yet you keep administering it. You keep destroying entire civilizations based on results that no one has ever achieved. The test is fair, Vethon said. It is challenging, but it is fair. Every species fails because of fundamental flaws in their nature. Fear, aggression, selfishness. These traits make them unsuitable for membership in the galactic community. The test simply reveals what is already there. Lisa took a deep breath. The weight of what she was about to say pressed down on her shoulders, like the whole planet was resting there. When does this test begin? You have 7 of your days to select your representatives. 12 individuals who will speak for your entire species. Choose wisely, Commander Monroe. The fate of your world depends on it. And with that, Vethon turned and walked back toward his ship. The door closed behind him, sealing without a trace, and the vessel sat silent once more in the Nevada sand. Lisa stood alone in the desert, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of red and gold. 7 days. 12 people. The fate of 8 billion souls hanging in the balance. She turned and walked back toward the command tent. There was work to be done. The world did not take the news well. In the first 24 hours after Vethon's announcement, there were riots in 17 countries. Stock markets crashed. Religious leaders declared it the end times. Politicians made speeches full of empty promises and false hope. But beneath the chaos, something else was happening. In a secure facility buried deep under the Rocky Mountains, a different kind of response was taking shape. Lisa Monroe had not slept in 3 days. She sat at the head of a long conference table, surrounded by files and photographs and psychological profiles. The task she had been given was impossible. Choose 12 people to represent all of humanity. 12 individuals whose decisions would determine whether the human race lived or died. She had rejected the obvious choices immediately. World leaders were too political, too concerned with their own power and legacy. Military commanders were too rigid, too focused on conflict and victory. Religious figures were too certain, too unwilling to question their own beliefs. Instead, Lisa had looked for something else. She had searched for people who thought differently, people who questioned assumptions, people who, when told something was impossible, asked why instead of accepting it. On the 7th day, she gathered her chosen 12 in the underground conference room. They came from different countries, different backgrounds, different walks of life. But they all shared one thing in common. They had all, at some point in their lives, done something that everyone said could not be done. Kevin Park was a game theorist from Stanford. He had made his name by solving economic puzzles that other mathematicians had declared unsolvable. He was 35 years old, wore glasses that he constantly adjusted, and had a habit of staring at nothing while his mind worked through problems that others could not even understand. Maria Santos was a philosopher from Brazil. Her work on ethical paradoxes had earned her both praise and criticism in equal measure. She was 41, with kind eyes and a sharp tongue, and she had never met a question she was not willing to ask. YU Fali was a retired army sergeant. He had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan through a combination of tactical brilliance and sheer stubbornness. He was 52, built like a tank, and spoke rarely. But when he did speak, people listened. The others filled out the roster. There was Nina Kowalski, a linguist who had decoded 3 ancient languages that experts had said were lost forever. There was Daniel Okonkwo, a mathematician from Nigeria whose theories on probability had revolutionized the field. There was Mei Lin, a psychologist from Singapore who specialized in understanding how people made decisions under pressure. There was Jack Brennan, a retired firefighter from Chicago who had saved 17 people from a burning building that everyone else had given up on. There was Sofia Reyes, an artist from Mexico whose paintings somehow captured emotions that words could not express. There was Omar Hassan, an engineer from Egypt who had designed water purification systems that were saving lives across 3 continents. There was Grace Nakamura, a negotiator who had talked down hostage situations that SWAT teams had declared hopeless. There was Ben Cooper, a teacher from rural Texas who had turned around a failing school through methods that no one could quite explain. And there was Priya Sharma, a doctor from India who had developed treatments for diseases that pharmaceutical companies had abandoned as unprofitable. 12 ordinary people. 12 extraordinary minds. The last hope of the human race. Lisa stood at the head of the table and looked at each of them in turn. They were tired and scared. They had been pulled from their normal lives and told that the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. Some of them were handling it better than others. "I know you have questions," Lisa said. "I will answer what I can. But first, I need you to understand something. You were not chosen because you are the smartest people on Earth. You were not chosen because you are the bravest or the strongest. You were chosen because you think differently." Kevin adjusted his glasses. "With respect, Commander, thinking differently is not going to help us pass a test that 47,000 species have failed. We need more information. We need to know what the test involves, what the criteria are, what previous species did wrong." "We have some information," Samuel Grant said. He had been given a seat at the table as a scientific advisor. Letharn provided a basic outline. The test consists of 5 trials. Each trial presents a scenario with no optimal solution. Our responses will be evaluated for wisdom, moral clarity, and the capacity for civilized behavior. "No optimal solution," Maria repeated slowly. "So we are being asked to make impossible choices." "It appears so." Yusuf leaned back in his chair. "In my experience, when someone tells you there is no good option, they are usually trying to make you choose between 2 bad ones. They want you to accept their terms instead of making your own." Lisa nodded. "That is exactly what I was thinking. Every species that took this test saw it as a puzzle to be solved. They accepted the rules as they were given. They tried to find the best answer among the options provided. And they all failed. So what do you suggest?" Nina asked. "That we refuse to play?" "Not exactly. I suggest that we play, but not by their rules. I suggest that when they give us impossible choices, we find a third option. When they tell us something cannot be done, we ask why not. When they expect us to be afraid, we choose to hope instead." The room fell quiet. 12 pairs of eyes stared at Lisa, processing what she had said. Finally, Daniel spoke. His voice was calm and measured, the voice of a man who spent his life working with numbers and probabilities. You are asking us to do something that has never been done before. You are asking us to succeed where nearly 50,000 other species have failed. The odds against us are astronomical. Lisa smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. I know. But here is the thing about humans. We have faced impossible odds before. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed us. We have walked on the moon. We have split the atom. We have built civilizations out of nothing but dirt and dreams. And every time someone told us something was impossible, we did it anyway. She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. I am not asking you to be perfect. I am not asking you to have all the answers. I am asking you to be human, to think and question and hope and fight, to refuse to accept that we are doomed just because someone tells us we are. Maria was the first to nod. Then Yusuf, then Kevin. One by one, the others followed. All right, Kevin said, a new determination in his voice. Let us show them what humans can do. Lisa allowed herself a moment of hope. It was small and fragile, like a candle flame in a storm. But it was there. Tomorrow, they would face the test. Tomorrow, they would fight for the future of their species. But tonight, they would prepare. The portal opened in the Nevada desert at exactly midnight. It was a circle of light, soft and blue, floating 3 feet above the sand. Through it, the human team could see nothing but whiteness, an empty space that seemed to go on forever. Lisa Monroe led the way. She stepped through the portal without hesitation, and the others followed. Samuel Grant came last, clutching a tablet computer that he hoped would be useful for recording data. On the other side, they found themselves in a chamber that defied description. The walls, if there were walls, stretched away into infinity. The floor beneath their feet was solid but seemed to be made of nothing. Light came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Veth Arn was waiting for them. He stood in the center of the space, his obsidian form outlined against the whiteness. 2 other beings flanked him, creatures whose shape shifted and flowed in ways that hurt the eyes to watch. Welcome to the testing chamber, Veth Arn said. You are the 347 species from your galactic sector to undergo evaluation. The test will now begin. Kevin stepped forward. Before we start, I have questions about the format and criteria. What specific metrics are being used to evaluate our responses? What constitutes a passing grade? Veth Arn's starlight eyes flickered. The evaluation criteria are complex and cannot be reduced to simple metrics. Your responses will be judged on their overall quality. You will know if you have passed when the test is complete. That is not very helpful, Kevin muttered. But he stepped back into line. The first trial will now commence, Veth Arn announced. The white space around them shifted and changed. Suddenly, they were standing on what appeared to be the bridge of a starship. Through the view screen, they could see the blackness of space, dotted with distant stars. And ahead of them, growing larger by the moment, was a massive black hole. A holographic display appeared, showing them the scenario. A colony ship was drifting toward the black hole. On board were the last survivors of an alien race called the Velthari, approximately 50,000 individuals. Their ship was damaged and could not escape the gravitational pull on its own. Nearby was a space station called Outpost 7, home to 10,000 members of another species. A rescue was possible, but it would require redirecting all power from the station, leaving its inhabitants without life support. They would die so that the Velthari could live. Save 10,000 by condemning 50,000 to death, Maria said quietly. Or let 50,000 die to save 10,000. A classic impossible choice. The team gathered in a circle, speaking in low voices. Around them, the simulation waited, the colony ship drifting ever closer to its doom. "The utilitarian calculation is clear," Kevin said. 50,000 lives are worth more than 10,000. We should sacrifice the station. "But the station inhabitants have done nothing wrong," Priya argued. "They did not cause the Valkyrie ship to malfunction. Why should they die for something that is not their fault? And the Valkyrie are the last of their kind," Daniel added. "If they die, an entire species is extinct forever. Does that not add weight to their side?" "Does it?" Sophia asked. "Is the existence of a species more important than the lives of individuals? The 10,000 on the station have families, hopes, dreams. Are they worth less because there are more of their kind somewhere else?" The debate went on for nearly an hour. Arguments flew back and forth. Tempers began to fray. The colony ship drifted closer to the black hole. Finally, Yusuf Ali spoke. He had been silent throughout the discussion, watching and listening with his steady eyes. "We are thinking about this wrong," he said. Everyone turned to look at him. "In combat," Yusuf continued, "you learn very quickly that accepting the enemy's terms means you have already lost. They set up the battlefield to give themselves an advantage. Your job is not to fight on their terms. Your job is to change the battlefield." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "This scenario gives us two choices. Both choices are bad. We are supposed to pick the least bad option and feel terrible about it. But who says those are only choices?" He stepped forward and addressed the simulation directly. "We reject the terms of this scenario," he said, his voice firm and clear. "We refuse to choose between two innocent populations. Instead, we propose a third option." Vetharn's form flickered with what might have been surprise. "Explain." "We would evacuate both the station and the ship. We would call for help from any nearby vessels. We would develop new technology to boost the station's power without killing its inhabitants. We would find some way to slow the black hole's pull or redirect the colony ship's course. We would do whatever it takes to save everyone. Those options are not available within the scenario's parameters." Vetharn said. "Then we reject the parameters." Maria stepped forward to stand beside Yusuf. "In our history, the greatest human achievements came from those who refused to accept the constraints they were given. When we were told we could not fly, we built airplanes. When we were told we could not reach the moon, we built rockets. When we were told a disease was incurable, we invented new medicines. The answer to your scenario is not A or B," Lisa added. "The answer is that we refuse to accept that A and B are the only options. We would find another way. We would never stop trying to find another way." The simulation froze around them. The colony ship hung motionless against the backdrop of stars. The black hole stopped its hungry spinning. Vetharn exchanged glances with his fellow council members. Something passed between them, some form of communication that the humans could not perceive. "This response is irregular," Vetharn said finally. "It is not within the expected parameters. It will be noted. Does that mean we failed?" Kevin asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "It means the test will continue. Prepare for the second trial." The space around them shifted again. The stars in the black hole vanished, replaced by a new scenario, a new impossible choice. Lisa looked at her team. They were tired and scared, but there was something else in their eyes now. A spark, a determination. They had done something different, something unexpected, and the council had not known how to respond. Maybe that was their advantage. Maybe that was what would save them. The second trial began. The second trial appeared around them like a nightmare taking shape. They stood in a hospital ward, surrounded by beds filled with dying patients. The air smelled of sickness and despair. Children cried for their mothers. Adults wept silently as their bodies failed them. A holographic display explained the scenario. A plague was sweeping through a planet, killing millions. A cure existed, but it could only be manufactured using biological material harvested from living donors. The harvesting process would kill the donor. One death to save thousands. Thousands of deaths to save millions. And the only viable donors were a group of prisoners. Criminals who had been sentenced to death for terrible crimes. Use condemned criminals to save innocent lives, Daniel said slowly. It seems like an easy choice, does it? Priya asked. She was a doctor, and her face was pale with horror. We would be killing people against their will, using their bodies as resources. Does a death sentence give us the right to harvest their organs? They were going to die anyway, Jack argued. At least this way their deaths would mean something. That is exactly the kind of logic that leads to atrocity, Maria said sharply. Once you accept that some lives can be used to save others, where does it stop? Today it is criminals. Tomorrow it is political prisoners. Next week it is anyone who disagrees with the government. The debate raged on. The dying patients groaned around them, a constant reminder of what was at stake. This time, it was Grace Nakamura who found the way through. She was a negotiator, trained to find solutions that satisfied everyone. We are thinking about this as a zero-sum game, she said. Someone has to lose for someone else to win. But what if we change the equation? She addressed the council directly. Instead of forcing unwilling donors to die, we would ask for volunteers. We would explain the situation to everyone, including the prisoners, and let them choose. Some people, given the chance to save thousands of lives with their death, would say yes. Not because they were forced, but because they wanted to. Because dying with purpose is better than dying without meaning. And if no one volunteers? Veth Arn asked. Then we would work to find another cure. We would research alternatives. We would never stop looking for a solution that did not require us to become monsters. Because the moment we accept that atrocity is necessary, we have already lost something more important than lives. We have lost our humanity. Again, the simulation froze. Again, Veth Arn exchanged those mysterious glances with his fellow council members. Noted, he said simply. The third trial will commence. The third scenario was even darker. They found themselves in a war room, looking at maps and troop movements. An allied nation was about to be invaded by a genocidal regime. The only way to stop the invasion was to share intelligence with the ally. But that intelligence had been obtained through betrayal. Sharing it would expose the betrayal and destroy the alliance forever. Keeping it secret would allow the genocide to proceed. Betray our ally to save them, Omar said bitterly. Or stay loyal and watch them die. Another impossible choice. But the humans had learned from the previous trials. Instead of debating which option was less terrible, they looked for the third path. We would tell our ally the truth, Lisa said. All of it. We would confess the betrayal before they discovered it themselves. We would explain why we did it and accept whatever consequences came. And then we would offer to fight alongside them anyway, not as deceivers, but as partners who had made a mistake and wanted to make it right. That would weaken your position significantly, Veth Arn observed. Yes, Lisa agreed. But trust is more important than advantage. And a relationship built on truth, even painful truth, is stronger than one built on lies. The fourth trial was the worst. They stood in a marketplace, surrounded by families and children, while soldiers waited for orders. Two groups of innocent people. Two communities that had lived in peace for generations. The soldiers demanded that one group be selected for slavery. If no selection was made, both groups would be killed. The team was silent for a long moment. Some of them had tears in their eyes. The weight of the scenario pressed down on them like a physical force. Finally, Yusuf spoke again. We would refuse to choose, he said. And when the soldiers came for either group, we would stand in their way. You would be killed, Betharn said. Maybe, probably. But here's what we have learned about humans through thousands of years of history. When good people stand up to evil, even when they know they will lose, something changes. Others see them standing. Others find their courage. Resistance spreads. And sometimes, what seemed impossible becomes possible. We would rather die fighting than live knowing we sent innocent people to slavery, Maria added. Because some prices are too high to pay. Some lines cannot be crossed, no matter what the cost of refusing. Ben Cooper, the teacher from Texas, stepped forward. He had been quiet through most of the trials, watching and thinking. You know what I have noticed about all these scenarios? He said, they all assume that fear is the strongest force. Fear of death. Fear of loss. Fear of making the wrong choice. Every scenario is designed to make us afraid, and then see what we do with that fear. He looked directly at Betharn. But fear is not the strongest force in human beings. Love is stronger. Hope is stronger. The willingness to sacrifice for others is stronger. Every scenario you have shown us, someone was willing to die rather than betray their principles. That is not weakness. That is the greatest strength there is. The council members had grown very still. Their shifting forms seemed frozen in place, like statues made of living light. One trial remains, Betharn said. His voice was different now, softer somehow. Prepare yourselves. The space around them began to shift one final time. Whatever came next would determine the fate of 8 billion people. Lisa looked at her team. They were exhausted. They were scared. But they were also proud. They had faced impossible choice after impossible choice, and they had refused to break. They had stayed human. Whatever the final trial held, they would face it together. The final trial took shape around them, and Lisa immediately understood why it had been saved for last. They were looking at Earth. Their planet floated in the blackness of space. Blue and green and beautiful, wreathed in white clouds. 7 billion people going about their lives, unaware that their fate was being decided in a chamber. Outside of normal space and time, the holographic display told them what they already knew. Humanity had developed nuclear weapons. Weapons capable of destroying not just their own world, but potentially spreading destruction across the galaxy if they ever achieved interstellar travel. Other species might look at Earth and see a threat. A danger that needed to be eliminated before it could grow. The scenario asked them a simple question. If they were an outside observer, looking at humanity from the perspective of the galactic community, would they recommend destruction? Would they vote to sterilize Earth and end the threat before it could begin? The team stood in silence, looking at their home, at the only world they had ever known, at the cradle of their species, floating like a jewel in the endless dark. This is it, Kevin said quietly. This is what they have been building toward. They want to know if we would destroy ourselves. If we say yes, we admit that we are too dangerous to exist, Maria added. If we say no, we prove that we cannot objectively evaluate threats. Either way, we lose. Lisa stared at the image of Earth, at the swirling clouds over the Pacific, at the brown deserts of Africa, at the green forests of South America. She thought about everyone down there. The children playing in schoolyards, the old people sitting on porches, the lovers walking hand in hand through city streets, the dreamers and the workers and the ordinary people just trying to get through another day. And something happened inside her. Something broke loose. Something that had been building through all the trials, all the impossible choices, all the moments of despair and hope. She started to laugh. It was not a small laugh. It was not a polite chuckle. It was a deep, genuine laugh that came from somewhere in her core. It echoed through the infinite chamber, bouncing off walls that did not exist, filling the empty space with something warm and alive. The others stared at her. Even Vethon seemed caught off guard. "Commander?" Samuel asked carefully. "Are you all right?" Lisa wiped tears from her eyes, still laughing. "I am fine. I am better than fine. I finally understand." She stepped forward, facing the council directly. "You want to know if we would vote to destroy ourselves. You want to know if we can be objective about our own threat level. But that is not really the question, is it? The question is whether we are afraid." She gestured at the image of Earth. 47,000 species took this test, and I finally understand why they all failed. It was not because they gave wrong answers. It was not because they made bad choices. It was because they were afraid. They saw impossible situations and let fear control their responses. They accepted false dilemmas because they were too scared to reject them. They chose the lesser evil because they believed evil was inevitable. She turned to face her team. "But here is what I know about humans. We have been afraid before. We have faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, wars that could have destroyed everything. The constant shadow of nuclear annihilation hanging over us for decades. And yes, sometimes fear won. Sometimes we did terrible things because we were scared." Our voice grew stronger, but not always. Not most of the time. When fear tells us to run, we sometimes stand and fight. When fear tells us to hate, we sometimes choose to love. When fear tells us that hope is foolish, we hope anyway. Because that is what humans do. We laugh at the impossible. We dream of the improbable. We refuse to accept that the darkness will win. She turned back to Vetharn. "So here is our answer to your final question. No, we would not vote to destroy Earth. Not because we cannot see the danger. We know what we are capable of. We know the terrible things we had done and might do again. But we also know what else we are capable of. Love, kindness, sacrifice, the ability to change, to grow, to become better than we were. You want us to judge ourselves?" Maria stepped forward to stand beside Lisa. "Fine. We judge that we are worth saving. Not because we are perfect, but because we are trying. Because every generation, we get a little better. Because the arc of our history, however slowly, bends toward justice and compassion." Yusuf joined them. "You destroy species because you are afraid of what they might become. But fear is a terrible basis for judgment. Fear sees threats everywhere. Fear cannot imagine change. Fear cannot see the potential that exists alongside the danger." One by one, the others stepped forward. Kevin and Maria, Daniel and Mei Lin, Jack and Sophia, Omar and Grace, Ben and Preya. 12 ordinary humans standing together, facing the judgment of the galaxy. "We choose hope," Lisa said. "We choose to believe that the future can be better than the past. We choose to see potential instead of just threat. And if you cannot accept that, if your test can only be passed by species that agree to destroy themselves, then your test is broken. Because any evaluation that produces the same result 47,000 times is not measuring worthiness. It is measuring fear." The chamber fell absolutely silent. The image of Earth hung in the air between them. The council members stood motionless, processing what they had witnessed. Then Vetharn did something unexpected. He bowed. "You are the first," he said, and his voice carried something new, respect. "The first to understand." "The first to pass?" Kevin asked. "The first to see the test for what it truly is." The other council members drifted closer. Their forms seemed more solid now, more defined, almost gentle. "The test was never about finding correct answers," Vetharn continued. "It was about revealing nature. Every species before you let fear guide their responses. They accepted impossible choices because fear told them those were the only options. They failed because fear was their master. But you laughed, one of the other council members said, speaking for the first time. Faced with the extinction of your species, you laughed. Not from madness, but from understanding. You saw through the test to the truth beneath. Lisa nodded slowly. The truth that fear is a choice. That impossible is just a word. That hope, real hope, is the most powerful force in the universe. Yes, Vetharn's starlight eyes seemed brighter now. Your species is welcomed among us. Not merely as members, but as teachers. You have reminded us of something we had forgotten through eons of caution and fear. That the darkness is not inevitable. That light can always be kindled. That laughter is the sound of courage refusing to surrender. A portal opened behind them, showing the Nevada desert, bathed in morning light. Go home, Vetharn said. Tell your people that they have passed. Tell them that the stars are waiting for them. And tell them that the galaxy is a brighter place because they refuse to be afraid. Lisa looked at her team one last time. At the 12 ordinary people who had done something extraordinary. They had not saved humanity through strength or intelligence or any of the qualities that other species had prized. They had saved humanity by being human, by hoping and dreaming and refusing to give up. She took Maria's hand on one side and Yusuf's on the other. Together, the team walked toward the portal, toward home, toward a future full of stars and possibilities. Behind them, floating in the chamber between worlds, the image of Earth seemed to glow a little brighter. The test was over, and humanity had passed.